Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
Today we're talking about Hacks, the HBO Max series starring Jean Smart and Hannah Einbinder. Season 4 wrapped up last May, and my guest today is production designer Rob Tokarz. Rob, welcome to Below the Line.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here, Rob. Warning for listeners, today's conversation will contain spoilers. Rob, to start us off, tell me about your history with Hacks.
I started on Hacks. Well, my history with Hacks was I watched season 1 because a good friend of mine designed it, John Carlos, and really enjoyed the show. And then it turns out several months later, Alec Contestable was the designer and he needed an art director. So we happened to be working across the street on a different show, myself, Jen Lucart, and Will Thayer, who ended up being the construction coordinator. And so we all just kind of crossed the street at Universal and jumped on to season 2, which was all about that tour bus. So I art directed season 2, and then after 2 episodes of season 3, I was called up to design the rest of the season. And then I've been there ever since. I did all 4, and we're prepping next season right now.
Now, for those who might not be aware, give us a sense of what the relationship between the art director and the production designer is, kind of how that team works together and how your first job led naturally into the promotion.
Basically, it's the production designer is the one that has the vision. They're talking with the director, they're talking with the DP, they're doing the big picture stuff. And the art director is the one that carries out the marching orders. That's really what it was. So for season 2, that means I'm overseeing construction, making sure graphics are being done, making sure the set designers are on point, sending out assistant art directors and set designers to locations to survey, make the machinery go, which is what I've done for a number of years. Now on Hacks, every season I've designed, I kind of try to step out of that role more and more. There's a tendency, I think, with earlier career production designers to hold on too much to the art direction stuff. So now I have Janine Ringer, who is doing all of it. And I'm able to be, super creative and think big sky, which is really fun.
Now, you and your team have been nominated for an Emmy this year. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Specifically for episode 9 of season 4. As a reminder to listeners, this is the episode that culminates with Deborah, played by Jean Smart, quitting her late night show while she's on the air. Rob, tell me, what was it about this episode that made it your choice for Emmy consideration?
Well, 2 factors. First off, I think it's the emotional peak of the season, the end of the emotional arc of the season, and this late night thing happens in episode 9. So I always like to pick a really great story point when submitting an episode. The other thing is practical. I wanted to have the maximum number of original sets that I could. And this episode in particular, we do have late night and all the work that we did behind late night. We had Jimmy's office in its final iteration. We have the Oscar set, which is a favorite of mine that turned something or nothing into something. Really, it came down to it had the greatest spread of sets. And, as I talked to my team too about which sets they were proudest of, and we all kind of come together, and sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree. This instance, we were all marching in the same direction.
Now, talk to me about some of your favorite sets on this. You mentioned how this is the culmination of the late night set.
Yes.
I know a lot of work into that, but give us some of the background.
Yeah, so the late night set. The late night set was something we knew was going to happen at the end of season 3. So it's something that I was able to have in mind for basically the entirety of hiatus, sketching and thinking and how I was going to put it together. On the practical side of it, we were on stage 1 at Universal, which was Kelly Clarkson's old stages. So we were already in the bones of a late night environment, but it was a black empty box. There was nothing there except for some stuff in the basement, like the pedestal cameras came up and things like that. So we designed the set from nothing, but also had to create all the different connective tissue. So there's the late night stage, which is the public facing part of Deborah Vance. Like that's the focal point of the show. That's where she wanted to be. Those, 4 square feet at the edge of that runway. That's her dream, that monologue. So we wanted to create that set, needed to feel like Deborah Vance, but also needed to nod to the institution of late night, which with recent news, this has all been very on point and on topic with what's been happening in New York.
Right.
So what I wanted to bring to mind is that this is Deborah Vance's version of it. So we needed to have the real stuff. We needed a band. We needed a desk. We needed some chairs. We needed an entrance. We needed some kind of curtain, some kind of something behind her. But we liked Art Deco with Deborah Vance. We did a lot of it with the tour bus. But overall, the set is a lot of nods to her history. So starting from where she's sitting, behind her, we put a star drop curtain, which nods to season 1 at the Palmetto. The floor, if you catch it, is a chevron pattern wood that is about the flooring in her mansion in Las Vegas and in her tour bus. The silhouettes behind her, if you read from right to left, it's Las Vegas to Los Angeles. We have the Art Deco arch, the Griffith Observatory, the Eastern Building downtown. These were all tones and finishes and colors I wanted to play in. Underneath the header, we did marquee lights. The DP had this idea of doing some kind of marquee thing. We happened to be shooting in Vegas that week. I'm walking down Fremont Street. I'm seeing marquee bulbs. I'm sketching things, sending them to the set designer to a drawing the set. And then the arches at the very top of the set are a nod to Johnny Carson's set when he moved to Burbank in 72. He had those same deco arches. So I wanted to bring in all of those bits and pieces to kind of tie it together. And then the curtain itself, it's the smoky pink that we love seeing her in. And you open the curtain and it's sequins. And there's Deborah Vance is just such a sequin person. You see her in sequins all the time. So we wanted to have that flat. So that was the design of that. But beyond that, there's the backstage of it. So behind that set, we had, again, it was an empty black box. We wanted it to feel like this is the place where this has been happening for 50 years. So we created a faux concrete floor. We built gold rooms, which is the rooms we store stuff in, made them look as old as possible. Behind the cue card area, we had everyone in the crew sign the wall as like a graduation after they retire or finish the show.
Right.
We put in old gags everywhere. We aged everything down, and we wanted to make it look kind of like rotten paint smells. You know, when you have it, you walk into a paint shop. So we wanted it to have that feeling. And then the rest of the building was used. I mean, we used the hallway outside of stage, the entrance from the dressing rooms, from her touch-up room, put in craft service. We shot in our costume designer's actual office. We turned that into Deb's office, which again, we did in our smoky paints and things. We shot in the hallway outside of that office. And then we built a number of production offices on stage. In fact, we started off in Ava's office. That ends up becoming 5 sets in the same footprint over the course of the season. It starts as Ava's, then we flip the way the dressing is, do a slight repaint, build a little hallway, it becomes Rob's office. Extend the set, becomes the conference room, and then it becomes the writer's bullpen, and then in the end, it becomes the attorney's office at the beginning of 10. So that same footprint happened on stage. So we had to match all these details, the aluminum extrusion, the type of door, the windows. They were either the windows that referenced the building we were in or CBS Television City. So we were trying to bring all these pieces together and give a cohesive world. We wanted it to feel like the kind of boxes we get into when we start a show. You're in an empty white box. Everything's a little bit weird. The furniture doesn't really match. And you're supposed to be the most creative person you can be. So
you prompted 2 questions for me. I'll try to get them out one at a time. First, when you talk about flipping a set to cover from Ava's office to Rob's office to the conference room, et cetera, to do that, are you working under the knowledge of what the scripts are going to be over all 10 episodes? In other words, are you guys largely locked? So you know that you're not going to have a scene in episode 10 that goes back to Ava's office, God forbid. Or are you just prepared to flip them like cards as needed? Right? Because again, I've been on shows where we have the scripts and I've been on shows where we don't. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of juggling gets more challenging if you don't know where you're going.
Yeah, so we're really lucky on Hacks because the writer's room happens early on. Last season, I want to say we had 7 scripts out of the 10, and then we had some broad outlines in the last 3 episodes. So we knew our showrunners are really communicative with us if something's coming down the pike. We also, I think it's everywhere since COVID. Everyone likes to block shoot things. We don't do that whole old school 5 days an episode. It's like, it's everything all at once. So we had a sense of it, which was interesting because then what happens is we wanted to show change over the course of the season. Ava's office has to get busier and crazier and more full of crap. And we did that all in a day. So it's our on-set dresser and our set dressers coming in and adding things. Jimmy's office shot 4 days. The first 3 days are the first 3 iterations. And then we had, I think, a week to do some built-ins. So that was, again, every day we redressed and made it more polished and made it more finished, I guess. So it was, we knew everything that was going into it. That doesn't mean that sometimes they get the idea of like, oh man, we really need this piece. We need this line. We need this thing. And so we'll try to put up whatever minimal piece of the set we need for that.
For some kind of pickup that happens later, or they realize from editing, right, that something needed to be done that was missed or something a little different, right?
Sweeten a joke or tighten a line or whatever it is. And it's, so it's always, it's part of the adventure of it all. We don't do a lot of like inserts. I'm used to other shows. You get that insert list toward the end while they're in editing, and all of a sudden you've got an assistant art director gapping 10 little baby sets. We don't do a lot of that stuff. We try to fold it into our shooting days. So, yeah.
Rob, the other thing that you brought up that I was curious to hear more about was the idea of the behind stage.
Yes.
When you're doing that, is it practical in a way? In other words, are you using it as a behind the stage for when you're actually filming, or are you building sort of a fake behind the stage within the stages. How are you able to utilize the real stage with the filming?
I mean, really, in terms of what we utilize of the real stages, all the there's the real stage wall, so it's got the netting and it's the black fabric and all that. So we have that, but otherwise, we brought in everything from the bleachers to the chairs to making the gold rooms, and all of that was us. I think one of the gold rooms was actually covering one of the pulley systems for the stage itself, so it kind of like folds entirely so that they can do what they need to do there. I mean, we use the backstage when we're shooting up front, and we use the hero side of the stage when we're shooting backstage. So we're all over the place. And then when they shot in our offices, they were just kind of everywhere. It's everywhere on our floor, and they just took over the art department with their carts. So.
And when you talk about being everywhere, the other thing that strikes me about this episode is you're also all over the Universal lot, both for some of the small conversations, but also there's a running gag where they're going through the tour side of things.
Yes.
Talk to me about what that looks like on paper, and then how, as from the production design perspective, you execute on that.
What we have on our show is we have Charlie Canyon is our D camera operator, and he's one of Adam Bricker's college friends. So whenever we do these kind of second unity things, he's the one that leads it. The montage work that we did in episode 4, that was Charlie and Bronte Campbell, my assistant art director, figuring out shots. So he'll go shoot things, he'll figure things out. He might go out and scout with locations and myself or whatever combination, and they'll test out 10, 12 different places. He'll kind of fake some shots. We're on the lot anyway. It's really easy. It's a golf cart and just driving around. And then they'll pitch it to Lucia and Paul and Jen, our showrunners, and then they'll figure out what they want to do. And so that's what we came up. What you saw there was the things that kind of passed muster. And then I know the Bates Motel was a scripted point, and the actor that plays Norman Bates is one of the actual actors that does it for the tour. I think they auditioned he's been there for 15 years. I think he does a really great job because he's been doing it for such a long time. And so it was, I think it was really funny. And then where we end up on Wisteria Lane, that's just the back lot houses. That's where that house was. It's changed over the years. So we had to repaint it, retouch it up. We added the wisteria, we added the plants, cleaned up the grass, cleaned up the porch. All this stuff is crumbling. They don't maintain it. They expect us to maintain it when we need to shoot it. So that's what we did. And that's where we found dancing on. Yeah.
You also talked about Jimmy's office. A lot of great scenes there, but you talked about filming them in a small period of time. Tell me more about some of your favorite aspects of that.
Yeah, we wanted to be a good flashy office that we could see expand. Originally, we were going to shoot at the American Cement Building in MacArthur Park. That's where we shot the end of season 3. So it was a raw concrete loft space overlooking downtown. And we knew that story-wise, we're starting right after the end of season 3. So he hasn't been there for very long. So creatively, it was, well, how do we make this office space function as an office space? But time-wise, it all makes sense. There's not enough time that happens story-wise for a big construction thing where people will come in and build real walls. So what we did is we developed this idea of a modular office system. You go and you order these office walls for these loft spaces, and they click together, and they have the glass, and they have everything. But we faked it and we built them because we didn't actually have enough time to get a real modular office system. So we built it to seem like it. So I was designing the inside of this. I knew what I wanted to paint. I knew how I was going to lay out the area when we were going to be on location. And then 4 weeks out, the producer says, hey, guess what? We're going to build the location on stage. That is a location that doesn't typically allow you to recreate it without their knowledge. We run into those locations every so often that you're not allowed to build it on stage. And the reason makes sense. They want to get the rental from the studios. They want that money to keep things going. So we end up having to pay a fee. And then in that 4-week scramble, I'm sending out a set designer and assistant art director, and they are all over the space measuring to the nth degree. The entire building is curtained off with these really pretty cool concrete X's. They're really dramatic. They're really dynamic, but they're all curved. They're really, really complicated. So we had to measure them and recreate them on stage, which meant we somehow had to measure them, even though we weren't allowed to actually access them because they're on the outside. And they don't let me dangle set designers off the edge of buildings anymore.
Not anymore, right?
So not anymore. It was very different back in the 60s. No, but it was really a feat. They were able to 3D model it, and then we sent it off to a foam company, and they did a 5-axis carving of them. We made 13 of them. Then our plasterers took over and plastered them. And then we had to have the backing because we don't do a lot of green screen or blue screen on hats. We've done it every so often, but it's too many windows. Every shot will be a VFX shot, which just that adds up. So JC backing somehow, well, not somehow, we shoot there a lot, but they had the backing. They had the picture from the right floor at the right distance. So we created a custom backing, slotted into their printing schedule, and we're able to pull it off. It was a feat. Like Drew Schultz was my construction coordinator this season. Him and Janine worked really hard to get it all to be accomplished. And it was great. I think my favorite compliment was that it didn't look like a set. And that's really my goal every single time.
Right, right.
Yeah, we've all been on sets that look like sets.
Yeah. Sometimes under time pressure or
Yeah.
just circumstances, you can't make that work. But I would not have guessed that you guys moved from the actual building onto stage for those scenes.
Yeah, yeah. It was quite something. It wasn't as painful in retrospect because the, cinematic amnesia we all go through. But it was, yeah. My team did a really great job. I'm really proud of their work.
It makes sense to me what you said earlier about this episode being the culmination of a lot of scenes and a lot of production design that you can see that work. What else about this episode, sort of in summary and conclusion, would you want Emmy voters to notice?
I think one of the big things about this season and this episode is it's unlike prior seasons in that we get to create this whole new world that Deborah Vance is in whole clock. There are very few sets that we go back to. We do see the mansion a little bit. We do see her LA mansion. She got her Vegas mansion. She has her LA mansion, which we spend more time in this time. But other than that, the whole world is different. She's it's an office setting type of comedy at times this season. So that's the big thing, is that we created this all new world for Deborah Vance. We had a lot of moving parts, a lot of pieces, and just had a lot of fun, really.
Now, and speaking of the fun that you have with this season of the show is not kind to our corporate overlords. But at the same time, this is a big scale corporate sponsored show, meaning Hacks. Do these issues and this sort of, I don't even call it attention, because I can see Universal leaning in. I can see them maybe not at times. Do these issues ever impact your production design decisions?
No. And I try to make sure that my production design decisions don't impact anything corporate. I let that layer of producer do their job and insulate anything from anything. We make our pitches, we make our jokes, we make our, whatever it is. But in the end, it rarely affects me, except when it comes to clearances. That's the only legal thing that is my, the albatross around my neck.
Any stories you can share with us about where that was trouble, or things you wanted to do that just couldn't make it?
Oh, it's just the way that things are now, where you have to clear every imaginable thing for fear that someone will remember that they made it 30 years ago and try to sue Universal. So we just go through it, and it's someone's full-time job now to take a look at every single stitch, and our job to create an unbelievable paper trail. So that's just the way we do things now.
I can imagine. Now, what else is interesting about this episode 9 is it propels this show into the season finale, where we find Deborah and Ava going to Singapore, where she's able to perform. So talk to me about the approach to what's going to be filmed overseas.
So a lot of what that episode was going to be happened before I started. What happened is our two producers went out to Singapore, and I think just reached out to a number of different places in Southeast Asia. Singapore was the lead contender, and what they do is they knew broad strokes what they wanted to accomplish with the episode, which is her finally letting loose. Like, she just wanted to let loose, but we needed to figure out exactly how would she let loose? What is her version of letting loose? And then it was a lot of scouting places in Singapore that feel awesome. Like, they needed to feel foreign, cool, and high-end. So they scouted these places, things like Gardens by the Bay, the harbor, and they brought all these options back to our showrunners. And then they wrote the episode with those things in mind. At the same time, behind the scenes, they're talking with the film commission in Singapore, trying to get what's cleared. And there's a lot of cultural things that had to go into it. And what happened was in December, right before the holidays, there was, I don't want to call it a hiccup, but there was something where we needed to cover ourselves, like something that might not have come through, or we might have to mix it between two countries. So we very last second flew out and also scouted Kuala Lumpur and Singapore, took a look at these locations. It was me, the first AD, our DP, and our producers, to just take a look at some options and really chisel in on what it was going to be. At Resort World Sentosa Island is where they wanted to show her in a casino once they get off the plane, there's all this buildup that you see the unbelievable vortex at Changi, and then they're in a casino again, and everything repeats itself. And Ava's flabbergasted they're in a casino again. And we needed to be there because we needed to show her trying to find a way to work around her contract. And that was her way of working on that.
Now, in general, I think when you're on location, and it doesn't even have to be as exotic as Singapore, you're trying to feature the location. And so to some degree, some of the production design work is done. And yet, on the other hand, and now particularly someplace far away as Singapore, when you do have to build something, there's a whole other set of challenges. Talk to me about the good and the bad, how all that affects your work.
One of the things that you do when you work internationally, and probably similar with all location work, there's a production company there that's facilitating a lot of the local legal permits and all the stuff that happens there. And I was essentially given an art department that was working out of Singapore that was at the recommendation of the production company, which I was totally down for. So they knew locally what was attainable, locally how to get things done. The thing is there's a huge time difference between here and Singapore,
right?
Because it's on the other side of the date line. So what would happen is I'd have my full work day in LA, and then I'd start getting emails from Singapore. So it would be them finding the shopping, all their bits and pieces, and I'd be, going until as long as I could in the night to get them the notes they needed, get them feedback, sketch a design, and then let them run with it. So it was a lot of from a distance. The other thing that there were certain things we didn't have time to do that we would normally do, like survey these locations. We did very rough surveys there. So where we get incredibly specific for builds in LA, there it was a little bit more, I guess, a little sculptural, right? It's not that as technical. It's a little bit like, let's make sure these pieces fly and we'll figure it out in prep and we'll just push to where we could. One of the big things that was a build that was significant was the stage. The stage was a big thing because we've seen her on stage so many different times. My brief was, let's make it interesting. Let's make it different than what we've seen her in. And I found this really great reference for, I think it was a Chinese model for a fashion company or perfumes, whatever it was. But it was this really great red on red on red, and a super saturated red, which I believe is a lucky color in China. And I wanted to create that. And then I kept coming back to this idea of a fan, and that created this, that gave me the idea for the shape of the semicircle behind her. And then last minute, once I landed, we get into Singapore, we start to tech scout. First thing my team runs up to me, says, which fabric do you want for the curtains? Which fabric do you want for this? And I'm like, all right, this is the one. It's going to be great. And then last minute, during the night before we started to prep that location, I said, it needs something. The fan needs something. And that was the orange gold trim around the outside of the fan was the last second thing that we weren't sure was going to happen. It's one of those notes that as a designer, you have to give the note, you want it. I'm a pretty nice designer. I'm pretty soft. I came up in the world of people throwing things, but that is no longer the case. But it was the right note. And so I gave the note, and the look on the face of the person you give the note to, but in this case, it was my set decorator in Singapore, was like, let me find out for you. I'm like, okay, let's see if it happens. And they pulled it off. The team that I had in Singapore was really great. I love my team in LA, but I was also very impressed with the work that they did for me there.
And Rob, how many actual days of filming took place in Singapore?
Technically 5.
Okay.
And I say technically 5 because a lot of the locations we were filming in, we had insane hours. One of the call times for shooting was 11:30 p.m. the night before the shoot day. That was one of the call times. And that was to get through the yes.
Oh, wow.
That was the procedure to get through into the casino for the locals, because there's all these, they have, I don't want to call them vice laws, but there are different rules for locals versus tourists in Singapore. And so they had to process through security a very different way. Now, 11:30 doesn't mean I'm there at 11:30. I think I showed up about 3:30, 4 o'clock. But then we had a day off during filming, but that just meant we've been shooting so many early mornings.
Right.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. We were shooting so many nights, and we had to turn around to do day. And so basically they stopped shooting at 3 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning on our down day, and then picked right up again, I think at 11:30. And it was just crazy. We just had a very crazy shooting schedule there. It was 5 days, but it spanned like 6.
Wow. And with those kind of challenges, any of those scenes from the period that they're in Singapore that you actually shot in the United States just because you could?
So there's one scene where Deborah and Ava are singing karaoke to the Chinese language Cranberry song, and they're standing in front of a screen. And then there's the reverse that shows people sitting there having drinks. that was the only scene in Singapore that we shot stateside. And we shot that in what was Dance Mom's mansion in her basement. So we found an area in the basement that was a living room, and Jen Luke Hart, my decorator, dressed it all out to make it look like a really cool Asian karaoke private room. That same floor we used and turned into their bath. They had a nice bathroom with a sauna and all that spa stuff. That turned into Kayla's dad's spa in another scene, in I think another episode. So we used the house for 3 different locations. Because that's how we do it now, right? If you can get, the more sets you can get out of a location, the more you justify the location fee, and the company doesn't move and you save time, even though it's down a set of stairs, which sometimes is considered a move. So yeah.
Other sets this season, either from these final episodes or earlier, that were particularly challenging for your team?
I think some of our strongest work was in 9 and 10. I think you saw the culmination, a lot of the season show up in 9 and 10. There may be some better shots of late night in some of the earlier episodes, especially when we revealed it. But hopefully you get the idea of where we're going for. I mean, in 9, we also had this Oscar sequence, which is one of those sets that nobody really knew how they wanted. And it happens sometimes, right? My job is to help facilitate what that needs to be. And this is just a testament to the process. We're just talking with Lucia. I knew the blocking she was looking at. And I knew what part of the Oscars we wanted to feel. It needed to feel like the press entrance. It didn't want to feel like the big show. We didn't want to feel like all the flashbulbs where we were having our scene. So we started with research, and then we were trying to scout locations that would get us most of the way there. We were looking for a location that would get us as close to what we needed as possible. And we're not lucky with that. It didn't really quite work, or it was one of those, it could have worked, but it would have been kind of a B-, C+ situation. So through the process of everything from augmented reality and 3D models, handing Lucia an iPad saying, I think it should be this, and her being able to look around. Ultimately, what worked the best was just a physical scale model of what I thought would work. And the way that we designed it is we wanted to see the Oscars at a distance, and we wanted to be down this side hallway. So we built it on stage entirely, and we did truss. The biggest thing with the Oscars is the scale. It's such a big event that we needed to be 20 feet in the air with our truss. We needed the hallway to be wide. We needed to have these giant curtains. We needed it to feel grand. Where the scene takes place was the press entrance. So I did black carpet, black curtains, needed to feel backstagey, some hedges, but then you have this red connective tissue. And then across, what I did is I kind of made a T of a hallway. And that T was the actual Oscars red carpet. That's where we had flash bulbs, props had people with cameras. And then I designed the giant letters that are, I think, 12 feet high. I can never remember exactly how high. But all we did is make OSCAR because I wanted to run past the opening. So you never needed the S of the Oscars. So you just saw part of it to imply bigger space. But it was one of those sets that once we got there, like, oh yeah, this is right. It worked.
Nice. And ironic, since as a plot point, Ava is being sent as far away as possible, and yet you're doing it probably on the next stage over, very close, it sounds like.
It's the next stage over. Yeah. I think we're right next to Ted.
Well, Rob, on a serious note, I understand that the LA fires impacted some of the locations, or at least one major location where you do filming.
Yeah, so Deb's LA mansion was one of our recurring sets. I think we first went there in season 2. And so we shot there, I couldn't tell you the number of times, maybe half a dozen times. And when you go to a location like that over and over again, you get close to the homeowners. They know you, they're familiar with the company. And so when we heard that the fires were in Altadena, our location department reached out. And then, in fact, the homeowners reached out to our location department to let them know that it was happening, the house was lost, but that they were safe. That was really the big thing, is that they were okay. It's an unfortunate loss, both personally, but also architecturally. It's a really beautiful house. It's a 1915 Spanish revival house. And, it just makes those episodes where it appears that much more poignant, knowing that that's, it's kind of a ghost. It's like watching a ghost. It's really sad. But one of the really great things that I think our industry was able to do was what the location managers did. They teamed up with a number of different organizations and created scoutphotos.org, where if you had ever had filming at your house and you were affected by the fires, you could submit your information. And, you go into a location, we're making plans. We're drawing the entire floor plan of the location. Set deck is walking around taking pictures of smalls and picture frames and every little thing so that we can take it apart and restore it. So when these people who lost their homes to go to insurance, now they had photos. Because I know I don't have photos of everything that I have in my house, what art departments do and set decoration departments do. So we were able to provide them with a lot of information. They can go to the insurance companies to start working on restoring themselves. So it was a really great thing that came out of it.
Well, memories of the LA fire is fade. For some folks, the impacts are, as we're always trying to point out on the show, long-reaching. And so great to see that we're able to provide some return to the community that's so integral for the work that we do in this. And also, again, a reminder that the impacts are ongoing on that.
Yeah.
Now, looking to the future, it is public knowledge that season 5 has been greenlit. What's your involvement? What can you tell us about what's coming up?
All I can say is I've gotten 3 episodes of outlines, and that's about it. We're still very early in the process. I'll probably know more when I get into the offices in a week or 2, but we're excited to be back.
So things are ramping up then. That we are in the, it's
things
not
are
like down
up.
The line, but things are getting hot and heavy here for season 5.
Yeah. Right now we're at the stage of, will this set fit on this stage, and which stages should we get? So we're very early, but we're really excited to see what happens.
As are we all. While we're waiting for season 5, where else might we see your work?
Well, things have been slow in our industry, and I'm kind of affected by it. I'm really grateful to have Hacks, and it's been really great the last few years, but it has been slow. So I've just been grateful to be able to stay in LA and work.
We know these are difficult times, Rob. Excited for you, though, that you'll have season 5 of Hacks coming down the pipe. On that note, we'll call it a wrap. Great having you here today.
Happy to be here, Skid. Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Listeners, I always appreciate your feedback. My email address is skid@belowtheline.biz. That's B-I-Z. Belowtheline.biz is also our website, where you'll find more than 265 past episodes. So if you're a new listener, please check out the catalog. Closing credits, thanks to Curtis Five for our music, John Wan for our logo, and to all of our listeners, I appreciate you. If you're a fan of Below the Line, consider a purchase. The logo is available on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers at redbubble.com. Other ways you can help. First, give us a positive rating wherever you get your podcast. Second, tell your friends about an episode you enjoyed, because that's how we gain new listeners. If you link to the podcast on social media, I'll be sure to respond directly. All of that aside, whatever your engagement, the fact that you're still listening means a lot to me. Thanks again from Below the Line.